research that you've conducted here. I just have one quick question before I open it up to the rest of the students.
Mhm.
When did this kind of media coverage on female-female relationships, when did that stop or, I guess, decrease?
I find actually that this more or less coincides with the rise and fall of the weekly and also the rise and fall of authoritarianism. So this is one of the last references I found. This is actually a story perhaps of the first separation or first female-female divorce, which actually brings up questions of like alimony payments and what to do about maybe children that were being raised by families. The weeklies sort of lose their popularity at the end of the authoritarian period, so late 1980s and early 1990s. This is a time when a number of new kinds of media come into being that perhaps compete with the weeklies. And I haven't totally confirmed this, but what I've found so far is these kind of representations fall off by the end of the 1980s, early 1990s. And by the time that the new sort of human rights-based movements that are sort of seeking recognition for protections from the state, that for some reason men become the more prominent face of same-sex coupling, and women seem to kind of take the back, disappear.
Okay.
And I'm not exactly sure why that's the case, but that's what I've found so far.
All right, very interesting. Do other students have questions for Professor Henry? Go ahead.
Hello, my name is Juan, and it was very interesting lecture, and I learned I learned a lot, even though I didn't understand it because of my English problem.
제가 너무 빨리 말해서 죄송합니다.
It was my, but the most interesting part was that you showed us that two pictures in the lecture, the wedding in the 2013, Kim Jo-kwang-soo, and the wedding in the 1970s. By your lecture, I felt that the same-sex marriage, same-sex wedding was surprising for to normal people, and I guess some people make fun of it, the same-sex marriage, but I felt that the rejection to the same wedding marriage was much severe in the 2013. Because it contained the physical rejection, like the campaign that by the maybe church or something like that. I thought about some regions of that without the media thing. My guess was that after 1990s, the conservative church and the mega church became so popular in Korea. Since the 1992, the Kim Il-sung government, the conservative church supported the conservative party's presidential election. After that, like the church have a strong power, and at the similar period, in Korea, the new right movement have a more power. That kind of maybe social political factors might might have might uh, have affected the viewpoint toward the same-sex wedding, I guess.
Yeah, I think you're actually very right. And I think you're very correct to point out that in these earlier cases, I didn't find any Christian opposition. I didn't find actually many even Christian discourses or discussions about homosexuality or opposition to it. I told you sometimes earlier discussions were framed in terms of like fear of spies or the confrontation with North Korea, but there was very little sort of outward kind of opposition to this. And I think that's also because of the nature of the authoritarian period when these kinds of individuals never publicly campaigned for this. I mean, this would have been like this is like a small like chanchi after the wedding. So this would have probably happened in someone's house and local family members came, but it never became a kind of public issue where, you appear in Cheonggyecheon and it attracts a kind of opposition. And that's because I think like, as I mentioned, these couples never made certain kind of claims on the state. They never made claims for legal protection. They didn't ask for special privileges. There wasn't an organized movement. So I think you're right that as LGBT movement also became very organized after the 1990s and had a very visible and public presence, that also created a way for the new right and Christian churches that are connected to conservative politics to target them and attack them. So that's one thing we should definitely keep in mind. And I also think the churches in recent decades have turned LGBT issues into sort of new North Korean issue. So LGBT people for many conservative Christians is like the new North Korean. Some people have made that argument. And there's even in recent years, this kind of connection of LGBT to North Korean issues by using this word Cheongbuk gay, the North Korean sympathizing gay. So to kind of tie LGBT life practices to the somehow destruction of the South Korean nation, and to somehow insinuate that gay people are supporters of the North Korean regime. I mean, it almost seems ridiculous, but there's clearly has been some kind of campaign and organizations within churches that have tried to use anti-LGBT policies in order to maintain their power, extend their power, gain more church followers. And those kinds of things never really happened, I don't think, in the pre-1990s period. If anything, there was some way in which, at least for women or some women, Korean society could, although they weren't perfect members, they weren't equal members, Korean society had a way somehow to accommodate their relationships. They might not have been totally accepted by their parents or their friends, but the facts that they're going to these wedding halls and holding ceremonies and trying to dignify and stabilize their relationships is kind of significant to me. And in an unusual way or ironic way, it seems like maybe things have gotten worse or things have gotten different when now we're trying to make claims on the state for legal protection. So it's true when it says this was the first same-sex marriage. It wasn't the first same-sex marriage, but it was one of the first attempts to legalize same-sex marriage. In that sense, it's different. But if you don't try to legalize and you stay sort of outside of the sphere of gaining public rights and public protections, maybe it's possible to have these kind of non-normative relationships that could be somehow accommodated, even though they're sensationalized in the mass media, but are not formalized. So yeah, I think you're right that something dramatically changed after the 90s. And also now with the decline of the Korean family, the number of children people have, LGBT people are somehow seen as like the problem for the potential disappearance of the South Korean nation if it doesn't reproduce itself.
Actually,
So,
ironically, the conservative churches released the like LGBT issues to the public, and it became a public issues. And ironically, it helped to help for the LGBT movement to be more organized, I guess.
I mean, they're both more organized. Both the pro-LGBT movement and the allies of the LGBT movement are more organized and they're bigger numbers. And the anti-LGBT movement is more organized and energized. So I think now we see this kind of confrontation that if you would have gone, for example, I went to one of the earliest LGBT pride festivals when it started in the early 2000s. No one cared what we were doing. No one even knew what we were doing. I don't even think, they just thought, well, what are these people walking around the streets? People just kind of looked at us as kind of, well, that's curious, but now everybody knows.
Right. At the very similar period with the 2013, the Democratic Seoul City mayor allowed them to have a LGBT parade, like the queer parade in the Seoul City Hall, and that became a political issues, I guess.
That's right. And Park Won-soo's initial support when he said, I personally support LGBT rights, but I don't want to support it as Korea's not ready for it. I don't want to publicly support it. As an individual, I support it. That you're right. That became a huge issue. And all these conservatives put pressures on public officials to make no support for LGBT issues because, it's not really a winning issue politically as you know, even Minjudang can't find a way to pass an anti-discrimination law or support LGBT couples. So you're right. There's a lot, that new right conservative Christian movement has a lot of influence, even though their numbers might not be that big. They somehow have a lot of influence to sort of like shut down the possibilities that the activist branch of the LGBT movement can gain same-sex marriage, can get rid of military law 92.6, can pass same-sex marriage, can, recently, for example, health benefits for same-sex partners has come up as an issue. Still a lot of way to go. If formalizing and asking your state to give you protections and rights should be the goal of the activist movement, then that has a long way to go. And we should remember that most LGBT people don't want to be in the public because being in the public and being active and going out onto Cheonggyecheon subjects you to homophobic violence, subjects you to being rejected by your family, losing your job, no protections. So there's also a dilemma that the activists don't represent all of the LGBT community because most of the LGBT community prefers to be off the radar, which is also a predicament.
Thank you.
Sure.
Any other questions from students?
Anything you saw in the sources, like written things that I didn't mention or I should mention that you thought were interesting? Especially if you read Korean better than I do.
Yara, go ahead.
Oh, so Well, you just mentioned if there was something that was interesting for us, and for me, to see how the news were portraying like same-sex married couple commits thievery together,
Mhm.
and the way that happened in the 65, and it's very interesting to see how even nowadays still, like when any person from the queer community commits something, the fact that they are from the community is more important than whatever uh, factual thing happened. I mean, at the end of the day, we are all people. Like it doesn't really need to matter whether you're part of the community or not. You're just a person. But I remember how at the beginning of this year with Corona, and in Itaewon, this bar club, I cannot remember, and how the whole Itaewon area was this discriminate because of they were just saying that they were homosexuals going there, and they were just talking very bad things about the whole community, without taking into consideration that it was just a club. It could have happened in any other part, right? It didn't even need to happen in Itaewon. It could have happened in any other place, but they were taking that as the most important part of the news, and um, viralizing it. So it's very interesting that something that happened in the 65 is still happening today. So there's so many things that we need to change in order for these matters not to continue happening.
Yeah, and it kind of demonstrates the power of the media. I mean, these were just print publications, but now, as you mentioned, with there's probably nothing like quite like the virality of the internet or Twitter these days. But yeah, the kind of technologies that medias can use to disseminate information very quickly, to draw on certain kind of images of stigmatized groups, and to kind of activate long-standing sentiments against those kinds of groups through media. Yeah, it's something we should be we should study and understand, so that we're able to intervene and challenge it or change it, or you know activists did very quickly protest how media kind of outing of people who are connected to a club where a lot of gay people go to continues to subject them to all kinds of different forms of possible violence or possible harm. And yes, we're living under, South Korea is a democracy, and South Korea has a constitution, and South Korea has human rights, and South Korea has elected officials. And yet, yeah, many of the kind of patterns you see from this earlier period are still with us. I'm really glad you noticed that and commented on that. So thank you for that.